Hi, I'm Andrew Tsao. In this episode of Backstory, we're talking about George's Bag, a humorous film about a man who finds himself lost in the Athens International Airport looking for his red duffel bag. The film was written, produced, shot, acted, and edited by a group of UW students as the focus of their study abroad program in Greece in 2011. With us today is the program's director, Taso Lagos, and the film's director and editor, Arnold Chon. Taso and Arnold, thank you for being here. Welcome to Backstory. It's great to have you. First thing that struck me when I looked at the film, and our audiences will see what we mean when we get there, is I was kind of in awe of the location within which the film is set, and it obviously ties into your program in Greece. Could you talk a little bit, Taso, first about how this came to be, why it is set in the Athens airport, and that'll give us a little insight into your program.
Well, it was set at an airport because to me it's symbolic of sort of the reality of our present culture. It's a very small space, it's self-contained, it's all very well directed, high security, and different people from all parts of the world coming together and all have a singular goal, is to get to their plane, till they get to destination. And the idea is what happens if somebody loses something, if you kind of go against the normal grain, if you will. And the fact that we shot at the airport was an absolute boon for us. We didn't expect that.
How did that ultimately come about? I mean, did you go in and apply, or who did you get in touch with?
We actually had two student liaisons go and meet with them and try to convince them to let us shoot there without like paying them, trying to convince them this is a student project.
Yes.
And we just need to shoot at your airport.
And of course, because you were the University of Washington, they said, well, of course.
I wish it was that easy.
Okay.
They actually only ended up giving us 3 days, which we were really grateful for. Yeah. But I would say a good 80% of the movie actually takes place in the airport, and only 3 of the days of our entire program we were actually able to shoot there.
Hence the magic of filmmaking. Certain interiors and exteriors might match in our minds and in our eye, but in fact are in completely different areas.
Yeah.
Yes? I mean, I think you probably were able to use some of the iconic areas of the airport, but then in some of the scenes that took place in rooms and such, you probably used a location you had more access to. Where was that?
We ended up shooting a lot of the back end of the backside, the offices and such, in the school, Duri, which we were staying at. The Greek, what is it? The university?
The American College in Greece.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any large exteriors we needed that had like stores, we used this shopping mall that was about like an hour subway right away.
Now, so this film, though, interestingly enough, does not come from a study abroad program centered around applied cinema, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's really the idea. I had the idea for a film. Actually, the original idea for George's Bag was supposed to be a silent film, exact like The Artist. So, but you know, they had more resources than we did. So when we started thinking about doing a study abroad program that focuses on making a feature-length film, the idea was to go ahead and use that one because it's the simplest to shoot. There's no dialogue. We can shoot fairly quickly. And then shoot it in a contained space, which is in this case is the airport. So that was the basis for that. And yeah, I mean, we did whatever we could to try to wrangle, and we didn't have any budget. We had no money, literally had no money at all to make this project. And the idea of the study abroad experience, however, was that, well, we went to Greece because the story, in a sense, took place in a foreign location. And I'm familiar with Greece. I've done study abroad programming there before. And I thought, why not Athens Airport? It's sort of my home. And of course, symbolically, I mean, the idea of George is sort of a figure that, I don't know, I don't want to be autobiographical about that, but it's that's how I felt when I came to the U.S. When my family moved as immigrants to the U.S. So. You know, I understood the idea of losing something and not being able to communicate with people and what that means on a cross-cultural basis. So it seemed to work.
And of course, being that it's in an international airport and being that the main character's first language is not English.
That's right.
And that situation that unfolds because of the lost bag, you have ample space for comedy and also pathos. And it gets at some of the things you were talking about at the beginning, the sense of a transient world and encountering each other across borders.
Yes.
And
Yes.
trying to understand each other through cultural and language differences.
Yes.
So how big was the group that ended up working on this project with you?
Our entire student group was, what, 23 students?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did everyone have a job on this?
Surprisingly, yeah, we managed to give every single person a job. Some people were like on the writing group. Some people were like set like production assistants.
Yes.
We had craft services.
Yes.
We had the airport liaisons. Everyone had a position, even location, and like
Yes.
securing contracts with people, appearance releases. So we made sure everyone felt like they were needed.
So the production background for the students, is that something you gave them in terms of workflow and production
Yes.
systems? And what's your background in that you were able to give this to your group as you took them abroad?
Oh my gosh, Andrew. I fell in love with films when I was 4 years old in the village in Greece. And at the age of 4, I declared to my parents that I was going to be a filmmaker. They had no clue what I was talking about. I spent some years in LA, so I was kind of in the quote unquote independent world, although I was very much on the margins of
Yes.
the margins of the margins of the independent world. And I've made my own feature-length film back in '93 with John Keister, local celebrity here in Seattle. So I was aware of filmmaking. I've
Yes.
done it all. I've done short films. I've written screenplays, etc. So I was very well prepared for that. In terms of the students, we had a seminar that took place the quarter before
I
the
see.
winter.
So a
when-
preparatory sequence
Right.
on how we're going to approach making this
Right.
happen, because you
Right.
can't make this up when you get there.
Oh, no, no, not at all. And we had guest speakers. I had a friend from Los Angeles, Mark Rossman, who's a director. He's done stuff for Disney. Had another local friend, Virginia, who was involved, and she came and she was teaching everyone how to, what roles to play. So we would try to prep the students as much as we could.
Yes. And so once that is laid out, then the inevitable question follows, what went wrong?
Well, I think the initial biggest obstacle, and I don't want to point fingers, but Taso's original script was so amazingly complex and like colorful.
Yeah.
It was just out of our ability at that time. It was out of our shooting like confines.
Okay.
We had goats. We
Goats in the
Yeah,
Athens
we had-
airport. I think that might cross the line.
we had like this huge conflict between pilots and stewardess.
Yeah.
We had riots. We had these 3 old men, pranking everyone.
Okay.
And it was just this huge movie
Yeah.
that was amazing at the time. I remember reading through it. But as we were trying to figure out the logistics of the film, it was just, we didn't think we would get a goat.
Right, well, yeah, that's reasonable, and somehow it's hard for me to imagine controlling that goat in the airport.
Yeah. But as we went along, it was the main problems became things like just figuring out how we're going to do these things when, for the most part, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think I was the most experienced person
Well,
there.
that's what I want to talk about next, is given the group and given the program, Arnold, let's talk about you for a second. Now you find yourself in the position of the creative leader of this entire team. Tell us a little bit about your background and how that came to be.
Well, as much as I love film, that's not where my background is.
Okay.
I'm a chemistry major at the University of Washington, and I only recently started working in film. And most of it was actually just through my own interest. Through my own time, I researched myself. I looked at independent movies. I realized there's a large community for independent filmmakers, even in the district area. I made a lot of friends. So a lot of my own knowledge is through experience.
I see.
So when it was when I applied to this program, it was through a friend of mine who also does her own film.
How do students like this network with each other? I'm very interested because I hear this a lot from students. You all seem to have an awareness of each other and know each other, but what is it? Facebook? How do you all connect and get to share knowledge and such with each other?
Well, surprisingly, there aren't that many outlets in the university area for film. So the few that there are kind of concentrates all the people interested in film into that one area. So there's the UW Film Club.
I understand, yes.
Yeah, and if you want to work in film, the closest thing that the UW offers is like the UW's Dailies video department.
Daily Double Shot?
Daily Double Shot, which is where I met a lot of the people.
And a lot of people come together and work in that. Okay. Let's talk for a minute before we watch the film about sort of the themes that are at work. This notion of the immigrant
Yes.
trying to fit into a world, the world of transience and impermanence. You mentioned at the beginning of our talk, one of the things that's fascinating about airports is everyone's pretty much there for the same one or two purposes, arrival or departure. Tell us a little bit about your thinking about this story as it originated in this context.
Yeah, Andrew, the idea was, and I think that what's happening at the airport is really, as I said earlier, symbolic of what's happening in the entire world.
Okay.
As the world becomes more globalized, as we become sort of more interlinked, the idea of cultures, you can say on the one hand are hitting each other, but and that was sort of the groundwork for the film. But the idea behind George was that there is a certain humanity that supplants all that. That we are connected by emotions, by feelings that rises above our culture, that's above our language and are above our history. So the idea was to take this laboratory of people who are bouncing off of each other. They have, as you say, either they're coming or going, and that's their goal. They have no goal to communicate with others, to perhaps start some sort of a conversation, and lo and behold, even to have feelings for the other person.
Yes.
So the idea behind the film was to say, hey, we are all, in our sense, different,
Yes.
but we're all human beings.
Yes.
And this humanity can emerge in these very interesting places. And that was really the premise behind George's Bag and George.
It's fascinating when you say that, because one of the tests of places like airports that bring so many people together is, and we all have had this test, is the sense of you are being asked to cooperate in a formal structure with total strangers in a very confined space. If you just think about the idea of queuing up to get into the plane and the whole politics of overhead baggage space, right?
Yes, oh yeah.
And all of that, it's a highly sophisticated laboratory dynamic to see how one chooses to behave selfishly, altruistically, all those areas in between. So in that way, the film really does speak symbolically and metaphorically about all of that.
Well, and that's a good point too. And also, I read somewhere that there are only 3 places left in the world where there is real human emotion: funerals, hospitals, and airports.
Fantastic.
And so the idea was, okay, now we have this place that is, this interesting space, but that has real emotion.
Yeah.
It's real. People are leaving, waving goodbye to each other, or if you're scared of airplanes like I am, I always think, is this my last flight? My last time on Earth? So you have real emotion. And that to me is very...
well, it's fascinating. Whenever the smallest events happen in airports, I was just recalling that last week a flight attendant on a U.S. plane had suffered a bit of a mental collapse and got on the PA system, and the plane was still on the ground. There's really nothing she can do. Nothing's really going to happen. But the context raises everything to a level of pitched alarm. You can't help it because of the vulnerabilities. You just and all the stigma, of course, that goes in with air flight today. Now here's a look at the trailer for George's Bag.
The city stars and freedom.
Why didn't you just say so? I know exactly where we need to go.
And I can't let my feelings in, 'cause I would not know where.
So, you're the janitor, eh?
She has been kidnapped.
Lavender!
Nancy!
I need eyes. In this airport, there are dangerous guys.
His flight leaves at 15:50?
Nancy! Nancy!
Given that you told me your degree pathway here at the university is not in filmmaking, but in chemistry, as someone who's made a lot of films, and we're sitting here with your executive producer who has a vast background in it, I have to say your grammatical control of the medium was exceptional. The way you put together the story in pictures, the dynamic way you decided to make those pictures work together, because I know you also edited the film. I'm curious to know, as a filmmaker, you say that a lot of it was peer learned and a lot of it was sort of through, you know, your relationships and watching other films. First, can you tell me who are the kind of filmmakers that you've used as a mentor in terms of looking at style and such?
Well, I mean, every filmmaker will say, oh, well, there's Scorsese, Spielberg. But when it comes to like the style I prefer, my top director is Edgar Wright.
Talk to us a little bit about his films.
His films are my top three.
Okay.
Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. And he's so good at, his style is intelligent to me.
Yes.
You can see how much thought he put into it, because a lot of it comes full circle. A lot of his cuts, a lot of his edits actually help tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that, for example, you would choose to set up a very dynamic cut from one shot to the next that when it's cut to makes us wonder why we cut to there, but within a moment, the element required to fill the frame occurs and it becomes a very powerful sequence, and you do that in a number of ways, and that's very interesting. So are you saying that it's time for us all to move from the cliches, and should we not talk about Orson Welles and John Ford and Fellini and Bergman? Should we leave all that to the 20th century and look to this new approach, this dynamic attack on film?
I think those giant names have established their ability in the business, and I think at this point we're standing on the shoulders of those giants, and it's from their basic understanding of film that we can now build upon and create our own styles.
It's fascinating because if you think about it, you know, the critique and the study of film, hence a show like this even, is very extensive when you consider we're talking about a medium that's really only a little over 100 years old.
That's right.
I mean, if you consider the other fine arts, music and theater and dance and painting, I mean, you're talking thousands of years of legacy. So, of course, the sort of critique and ability to look at it is quite large, but film, as you're trying to point out in a way, it's still a new medium, even though a lot of us might say, well, these are the established codes of film grammar and cutting, and they must be followed. But I do appreciate you saying that you acknowledge that you are standing on the shoulders of some great giants. So tell us a little bit about your future as a young filmmaker based on this background of chemistry and filmmaking.
Well, my immediate goal is graduate level film school.
Okay.
And I do want to go into the whole filmmaking business.
Yes.
It's an interesting field to try to get into.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult for something like that isn't so, I guess, glamorous.
It's probably seen as glamorous from the outside, but I think you and I, as the older members of this panel here, can attest to the younger member that it's not so glamorous. I mean, this leads me to this next topic, which is, you know, in our time, you know, I still recall when I went and began working in film, I remember going to buy my roll of 16 film, the preciousness of that 100-foot roll.
Oh, yes.
I remember loading it into the Bolex.
Yes.
I remember putting it out on a Steenbeck flatbed, and I remember the incredible terror of the cut, right, with the razor blade and that idea. And we are also, and back then the idea was you would finish it and put the film can under your arm, walk it to the place you asked it to be shown and hoped.
Yes.
You're in a different world.
Oh.
Digital media, the internet, Vimeo, YouTube, the proliferation of film festivals. We're in a different world now, right?
Yeah.
I guess the democratization of media. Can you reflect on that phenomenon
Sure.
as a teacher?
Yes, and you bring up some really good points, Andrew, which is that the old film, and you mentioned about film. Remember the glue when you cut the film and the splice? I still remember
the smell.
The smell.
Yeah.
Well, it is a world that's changing, and of course it has to change. The thing that I miss about it is that in the old days, I mean, there was an interesting thing about film that was so very special. Today, because of video is very cheap, I'm not saying that it's not special, but it's more available. And you hit it on the nail in terms of democratization. But at the same time that you have democratization, where more people are able to make films, the idea of film is changed, and the specialness of it maybe is sort of changing as well.
Yeah.
And Hollywood, of course, now, because of their resources, they're able to make these huge films, which are very different from the kinds of films that can be made, you know, with just simple equipment. So it's a changing time. I think there's some good things about it. I think there's some not so good things about it. And we'll see what's going to happen. Having said that, I think the point that you had mentioned during the break, which is the idea of humanity, is so vital, is that the students today and more people, this is the video generation. They speak, they think, and they act in video images. So, but the question is, how do you shape that into a form that actually, A, can tell really good stories, stories that are humane, that advance our development as human beings, and then ultimately leave a lasting legacy about the culture and era that we live in today.
Yes. It's fundamentally, you know, similar to when I'm talking to a teacher of writing, perhaps, and they would say, well, you know, I can teach the form, I can teach style, I can teach a lot of things. But at its core, the fundamental question is, why are you writing?
Exactly.
Who is doing the writing, and for whom?
Right.
And those are big questions. And you know, I might say those are questions that one hopes get asked continually in a young filmmaker's journey. And I think that, you know, one of the things that is true about some of the old masters we spoke about, you know, people often forget that it wasn't just their style, it wasn't just their aesthetic, it wasn't just something about, and they transcended the medium, they showed us new ways to look at film, but underneath, the thing they have in common, whether you're going from Scorsese to Bergman or Fellini or Antonioni and Godard, is that they were all trying to explore something about humanity.
Exactly.
That was profound to them,
Yes.
and the medium was the medium by which these stories were told, not the point itself.
Exactly. And Andrew, you asked earlier the question of why study abroad program, and that's the idea that I try to impart to the students, is that this isn't just a regular filmmaking program, because those exist everywhere.
Exactly.
The idea is to learn something about humanity. Someone once said that the purpose of a study abroad program is to invite students into their humanity. So the idea then of coupling filmmaking with study abroad is for them to go and experience another culture, to feel like outsiders, and what that means, because after all, I was the immigrant, I was the outsider, and maybe from that they will somehow think more or reflect more on the idea of what it means to be a human being, so that they develop this humanity. And that's the screenwriting, which I think is so vital and I think is underrated. It's in a great literature. People don't read it as such. If you read some of the great screenplays, they're bubbling with the idea of humanity. They're searching, I mean, for something to understand ourselves, and that's what makes them so timeless.
Yeah, well, and as you say, timeless. This also suggests one of the reasons why a silent film won Best Picture in the Academy Awards this year. It really spoke to that idea. And of course, I'm going to expect now you've made maybe lifelong friendships and relationships through the making of this project. These will because the experience, as we know, is, as you say, all of the people involved are placing themselves in this context of great pressure and the demand for a creative response immediately and solutions immediately, and you learn a lot about each other, yes?
Yeah, you can't shoot a film in that amount of time on that budget without opening up and just being able to say, I need you to do this.
Right.
I mean, we're all friends, so we have to understand that I'm not mad at you. You just gotta, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Congratulations, and we look forward to seeing what is in store for you next. And it's a pleasure meeting you, and being that we both teach here at the university, I look forward to more conversations like this. And thank you for watching Backstory. I'm Andrew Tsao, and I will see you again behind the scenes.